Every night around midnight, your television said goodbye. Not a glitch, not a malfunction. The station was done for the day. An announcer looked into the camera and thanked you for watching. The Star-Spangled Banner played over footage of the American flag. Then the screen switched to a test pattern followed by static. Snow, a faint hiss that filled the room if you forgot to turn the set off. That was it. Television was over, not just on your channel, on every channel. The whole country went dark at the same time. If you could not sleep at 3 in the morning, that was your problem, because there was nothing to watch. America had 3 channels, and when those 3 channels said the day was done, the day was done. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Most people under 50 have no idea that television used to stop, that there was a moment every night when a human being looked into the camera, thanked you for watching, and wished you a pleasant good night, that a poem called High Flight played over footage of a jet fighter climbing through clouds, that the national anthem meant bedtime, not a ball game, that after the anthem faded and the flag disappeared, your screen filled with color bars and a long droning tone that could wake the dead, followed by static that hissed until sunrise. This was normal. This was every night. From the 1950s through the early 1980s, this is how television worked in the United States. It had a beginning and an end. It opened in the morning with the anthem and it closed at night with the anthem. And in between, for those few hours of broadcasting, an entire nation watched the same thing. In 1948, only 1 out of every 100 American homes had a television. If your family had one, you were the most popular house on the block. Neighbors came over uninvited. They sat on borrowed chairs in the arms of your sofa and stared at a screen the size of a dinner plate inside a wooden cabinet that weighed more than some of them did. By 1955, more than half the country had a set. By 1960, nearly 9 out of 10. And by the end of the 1960s, 95% of American households owned a television. No technology in history had entered American homes that fast. Not the telephone, not the automobile, not the radio. In barely 15 years, television went from a curiosity in a department store window to the single most important object in the living room. It was a piece of furniture, a real one, a wooden cabinet you dusted and polished, with a screen that glowed warm when the set was on and stayed warm for minutes after you turned it off. Some families kept a doily on top with a vase of plastic flowers. Most had rabbit ear antennas wrapped in aluminum foil because someone had heard it helped the reception, and nobody ever took the foil off because nobody wanted to be the one to admit it made no difference. You turned it on after dinner or during dinner because by the early 1960s, families had started eating in front of the television. Swanson made a frozen meal on an aluminum tray that you heated in the oven and ate on a folding television tray table, and nobody thought twice about it. Dinner moved from the dining room to the living room, and the television was the reason you watched until bedtime. And there were only 3 choices: CBS, NBC, ABC. That was the entire universe. No cable, no satellite, no streaming, no internet. 3 networks controlled 95% of everything Americans watched during primetime. A show that pulled less than a 30 share in those days was considered a failure and got canceled. Today, a show with a 3 or 4 rating is called a hit. That is how completely the landscape has changed. And because there were only 3 channels, the whole country watched the same things, not similar things. The exact same things at the exact same time on the exact same night. On February 9th, 1964, 73 million people watched 4 young men from Liverpool play rock and roll on The Ed Sullivan Show. That was 40% of the entire population of the United States, watching one variety show on a Sunday evening. It was not a special event the way we think of events now. Ed Sullivan was on every week. But that week, because there was nowhere else to go, 40% of every man, woman, and child in the country ended up in the same place. And the next morning at school, at work, and at the diner, everyone was talking about the same thing, because everyone had seen it. That's the part that's hardest to explain to anyone who didn't live through it. It wasn't that the shows were better. Some were great, some were average, and a few were terrible. What made it different was that there was no choice. And because there was no choice, the experience was shared by everyone. The Beverly Hillbillies premiered in September 1962 and was the #1 show in the country within 3 weeks. It stayed #1 for 2 straight years. Critics hated it. The New York Times called it strained and unfunny. Variety said it was painful to sit through. The public didn't care. The 8 most watched half hours in the entire history of American television are all Beverly Hillbillies episodes. Not Super Bowls, not finales. Regular Tuesday night episodes of a sitcom about a hillbilly family that struck oil and moved to Beverly Hills. One of those episodes, The Giant Jackrabbit, aired on January 8, 1964. 65% of every television set in America was tuned to it. 6 weeks after President Kennedy had been assassinated, 65% of the country sat down and watched Granny chase a kangaroo she thought was a jackrabbit. Because the country needed to laugh, and there was only one place to go, Bonanza owned Sunday nights the way nothing owns any night anymore. The Cartwright family on the Ponderosa Ranch, the first major Western filmed entirely in color, was #1 in the ratings for 3 straight seasons in the mid-60s. Bonanza was progressive in ways people forget. The cast once refused to perform in Jackson, Mississippi because the venue wanted to segregate the audience. Andy Griffith gave America Mayberry, a small town so gentle and so removed from the chaos of the real world that it became shorthand for a kind of America that may never have existed, but that millions of people wanted to believe in. Gunsmoke ran for 20 seasons and 635 episodes, making it the longest-running primetime Western in television history. Gilligan's Island only lasted 3 seasons, but it never left the air, running in reruns for decades and becoming more famous after cancellation than it ever was during its original run. The cast never saw a dime in residuals. The show's creator reportedly made $90 million from syndication, while Dawn Wells, the actress who played Mary Ann, lost everything in the 2008 financial crash and needed a GoFundMe campaign 10 years later just to cover her medical bills. Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, The Dick Van Dyke Show, Star Trek, The Addams Family, The Twilight Zone. These weren't just television programs, they were the shared vocabulary of an entire generation. You didn't have to explain who Gilligan was or what The Twilight Zone meant. Everyone knew, because everyone had watched, because there was nothing else on. And every night, the whole thing ended. The announcer thanked you, the minister prayed, the anthem played, the test pattern appeared, and the country went to sleep. There was a boundary to it. Television was something you did between dinner and midnight, not something that followed you through every waking minute of every day. And when Saturday morning came, the children owned the set. You woke up before your parents, tiptoed to the living room, filled a bowl with whatever cereal had the best prize inside, sat cross-legged 3 feet from the screen with the volume turned low so nobody woke up, and you had the television to yourself for the only time all week. Cartoons from 7 until noon, the Flintstones, the Jetsons, Johnny Quest, Space Ghost, that was the deal. Saturday morning was yours, Sunday night was the family's, and on Monday, everyone at school talked about the same cartoons because every kid in America had watched the same ones. The history that came through that screen was just as shared. On November 22, 1963, Walter Cronkite told the nation that President Kennedy had been shot and killed in Dallas. He removed his glasses, paused, looked at the clock, and kept going. CBS stayed on the air continuously for 4 straight days. No commercials, no regular programming, just the news. It was the first time television had ever done anything like that. The entire country watched the same funeral, the same flag-draped coffin, the same riderless horse through the streets of Washington. Cronkite became the most trusted man in America, not because he was perfect, but because he was the only voice everyone shared. On July 20th, 1969, 600 million people around the world watched Neil Armstrong step onto the surface of the moon. In living rooms across the country, families sat together and watched a human being walk on another world in real time through a screen no bigger than a small window. Nobody who was in front of a television that night ever forgot it. It was the single greatest demonstration of what one screen, shared by everyone, could mean. Then they took it apart. In 1971, CBS did something that nobody saw coming. It canceled nearly everything its audience loved. The Beverly Hillbillies was gone after 9 seasons. Green Acres was gone. Mayberry RFD, the Andy Griffith spin-off, was gone despite ranking 15th in the national ratings. Hee Haw was gone despite ranking 16th. Lassie was gone. The Ed Sullivan Show was gone after 23 years. The Red Skelton Show was gone. The Jackie Gleason Show was gone. All of it was wiped off the schedule in a single season. They called it the Rural Purge. CBS commissioned a study showing urban consumers spent 2.5 times more than rural consumers. Advertisers did not want the biggest audience anymore. They wanted the most profitable one, young, urban viewers with disposable income. The millions of older and rural Americans who had watched those shows faithfully for years were suddenly the wrong audience. Pat Buttram, the actor from Green Acres, said it plainly. It was the year CBS killed everything with a tree in it. Fred Silverman, the executive who ordered the cancellations, called the shows junk. He replaced them with All in the Family, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and MASH. Brilliant shows, groundbreaking, but the fans of those canceled programs never got a farewell episode. They never got a finale. The shows just stopped. One week they were on, the next week they were gone, replaced by something that was not made for the people who had been watching. The idea that television existed to serve everyone, that the biggest audience was the best audience, died that year and never came back. And then the technology finished what the executives started. In 1972, HBO launched as the first premium cable channel. Cable was in 8% of American homes in 1970, 23% by 1980, and 60% by the end of the 80s. Each new channel took a few more viewers away. MTV arrived in 1981 and gave teenagers their own world. CNN put news on 24 hours a day and made the nightly anchor less important. VCRS let you watch what you wanted, when you wanted, for the first time in history. The remote control meant you never had to get up from the chair again, and channel surfing replaced loyalty. Fox launched in 1986 as a fourth network. Then came satellite, then DVDS, then TiVo, then streaming. The combined primetime share of CBS, NBC, and ABC fell from 95% to 61% by the early 90s. By 2012, it was down to 39%. Today, the average American home receives more than 200 channels, but watches only 10 to 13 of them. There is more television available right now than at any point in human history, and there has never been less reason to watch any of it together. What disappeared was not the technology. There are more screens in the average American home today than there were channels in 1965. What disappeared was the experience. The family in one room watching one thing. The father who chose the channel by walking to the set and turning the dial. The mother who made popcorn on the stove and put it in a metal bowl. The children on the carpet. The TV dinner on the folding tray, the test pattern at midnight, the national anthem in the morning, the conversation on Monday where everyone at the office talked about the same show because everyone had seen it, the feeling that when something happened on television, it happened to the whole country at once, The Beatles, the moon landing, the Kennedy funeral, 60 million people in the same moment, connected by a screen the size of a small window in a wooden cabinet in the corner of the living room. The average CBS viewer today is 63 years old. The average NBC viewer is 59. They are the last generation that knows what it felt like to have three choices and to share all of them with the entire nation. They are still watching television, but now most of the time they are watching it alone. If you remember the test pattern coming on after midnight, or the national anthem playing before the screen went dark, or racing to the television on Saturday morning before anyone else woke up, I would like to hear about it. What shows did your family watch together? Do you remember when television had an ending? Was there a moment you saw on that screen that stayed with you for the rest of your life? Leave it in the comments. And if this was worth your time, subscribing helps more people find these stories before the generation that lived them is gone.